The warp had always hungered. For 10,000 years, Slaanesh, the Dark Prince of Chaos, the youngest and most terrible of the ruinous powers, had feasted upon the souls of the fallen, glutted itself on excess and sensation. But even godhood grew stale. Even eternal damnation could become predictable. In the depths of the immaterium, where thought became reality and reality was but a dream, Slaanesh stirred upon its throne of screaming faces. The god of excess had tasted every pleasure, inflicted every pain, experienced every sensation that mortal minds could conjure. The Eldar souls that sustained it were exquisite, yes, but they had become routine. The daemon needed something new, something fresh. And then, like a whisper across the impossible geometries of the warp, Slaanesh sensed it, a tear in the fabric of existence itself, not a portal between realms, but a wound between realities. Through this infinitesimal crack, the Dark Prince perceived something that made even its ancient essence shudder with anticipation. A multiverse of such vast emotional resonance, such concentrated heroism and villainy, such extremes of power and passion, that it dwarfed even the galaxy it had so long tormented. The DC Universe. Slaanesh reached out with tendrils of pure want, pure need, and pulled. The first sign that something was wrong came to Dr. Fate as he meditated within the Tower of Fate. Kent Nelson's eyes snapped open behind his golden helm, and for the first time in decades, Nabu, the Lord of Order who dwelled within the helmet, felt something that might have been fear. Impossible. The voice of Nabu resonated through Kent's mind. There is a presence, something from beyond the source wall itself. Before Kent could say something, reality screamed. Across the multiverse, magic users, psychics, and beings attuned to the fundamental forces of existence felt it, a psychic shockwave of such perverse intensity that many immediately lost consciousness. On Themyscira, the oracle stones cracked. In the rock of eternity, the wizard Shazam clutched his staff as the very pillars of magic trembled. In Atlantis, the sorcerer priests began to bleed from their eyes. And in Gotham City, in the depths of Arkham Asylum, every single inmate began to laugh. The breach opened not in one place, but everywhere and nowhere. Slaanesh did not so much enter the DC universe as it infected it, seeping through the cracks in reality like a disease. The warp followed in its wake, a tide of madness and impossible geometry that threatened to drown rational existence itself. On Oa, the ancient citadel of the Guardians of the Universe, alarms that had never sounded in billions of years suddenly blazed to life. Ganthet, the Guardian who had shown the most emotion among his kind, stared at the readouts with growing horror. "The emotional spectrum is changing," he said, his normally stoic voice trembling. "There is a new color, a new frequency, but it should not exist. It cannot exist. The spectrum of light that powered the Lantern Core, that comprised of will, rage, avarice, fear, hope, compassion, and love, was immutable, a fundamental constant of their universe. Yet now, bleeding through like oil on water, was something else, a corrupted purple-pink radiance that seemed to pulse with a sickening rhythm. It was desire, yes, but desire taken to such an extreme that it became its own antithesis, a hunger so vast it consumed even itself. The Justice League assembled in the watchtower within hours. Superman stood at the head of the conference table, his expression grave. Around him sat Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern, Hal, Jordan, Aquaman, Cyborg, and Martian Manhunter. Dr. Fate had teleported in moments before, and his appearance alone told them the situation was dire. Kent Nelson never donned the helmet of fate unless the threat was existential. "Report," Batman said, his fingers already flying across the hollow display, compiling data from 1,000 sources across the globe. "Magic is dying," Dr. Fate said simply. "Or rather, it is being transformed, corrupted. Something has entered our reality from a place that should not be accessible, not another dimension, not the phantom zone or apocalypse or any realm we have encountered. This is from outside our cosmic structure entirely. The Guardians confirm it, Hal Jordan added, his ring flickering with an unsteady light. They're calling an emergency session of all the core. I have detected widespread psychological disturbances across every major population center on Earth, Martian Manhunter said. His red eyes troubled. Suicide rates have tripled in the last 6 hours. Acts of violence are escalating. But more disturbing, acts of hedonism and excess are occurring with no rational explanation. People are abandoning their families, their responsibilities, chasing after pleasures with a fervor that borders on madness. It's not just Earth, Cyborg reported, interfacing directly with the Watchtower's systems. I'm getting similar reports from Thanagar, Ran, New Genesis. Even Apocalypse. Darkseid's envoy sent a message 30 minutes ago. He wants to talk. Darkseid wants to talk? Superman's eyes narrowed. That's never a good sign. Wonder Woman had been silent, but now she spoke, her voice carrying the weight of her divine heritage. I have consulted with Olympus. The gods are disturbed. They sense a presence that is both similar to and utterly alien from themselves. A god of sorts, but one born of different principles, different realities. Ares called it an abomination of war itself. For the god of war to be repulsed by something. Batman's fingers stopped moving. On the screen before him, he'd pulled up security footage from dozens of cities. The pattern was unmistakable. We're losing people, not to death, though that's happening too, but to conversion. They're changing. Look at their eyes. The footage showed men and women in the streets, and in every case, their eyes held the same quality, a fevered gleam, a desperate hunger. Pupils dilated to the point of overtaking the iris. They moved with unnatural grace, spoke in cadences that seemed almost rehearsed, and many bore self-inflicted wounds that they seemed to regard as art. They're worshipping something, Diana observed. I have seen cultists before. This is the same pattern. Then we find the source and we shut it down, Superman said with characteristic determination. Dr. Fate shook his head slowly. I fear it will not be so simple, Superman. What we face is not an invasion in the traditional sense. It is a corruption. And corruption spreads. As if to punctuate his words, the Watchtower's alarms suddenly blazed to life. Cyborg's holographic displays lit up with red warning icons. We've got a situation in Metropolis, he said. Mass gathering at Centennial Park. Estimated crowd, 30,000, and growing. And they're not alone. The main view screen switched to show the park. The League members stared in stunned silence at what they saw. The crowd had formed a massive circle around the park's central fountain, which had been transformed into something obscene, a monument of flesh and metal that pulsed with unnatural life. Adorned with symbols that hurt to look at directly, and moving among the crowd were things. Creatures that had once been human but were now twisted into impossible shapes, their flesh too smooth, too perfect, and terrible in their beauty. They carried instruments that looked like weapons and musical devices simultaneously, and the sounds they made were agony and ecstasy combined. At the center of it all stood a figure that could only be described as a herald. It stood 8 feet tall, its armor a fusion of Baroque ornamentation and living tissue. Its face was a mask of gold and silver that shifted between expressions of rapture and torment, and from its back extended 6 arms, each holding a different implement of pleasure or pain. When it spoke, its voice carried across every broadcasting device in Metropolis, a sound like silk and razors. People of this new realm, it said, rejoice. You have been chosen to experience the ultimate liberation. She who thirsts has turned her gaze upon your reality, and in her infinite generosity, she offers you release from the prison of moderation. No more will you be shackled by weakness, by restraint, by the pathetic limitations of your moral codes. The Dark Prince welcomes all who would embrace true sensation. We need to move. Now, Superman said, already heading for the teleporter. Wait. Batman's voice stopped him. This is a trap, or at the very least, rushing in is exactly what they want. Look at the crowd. They're not hostages, they're willing participants. If we attack directly, we risk turning 30,000 civilians against us. Then what do you suggest? Superman's frustration was evident, but he trusted Bruce's tactical mind. We need more information. Fate, can you identify what that thing is? Dr. Fate had been studying the Herald through mystical senses, and what he saw clearly disturbed him. It feels like a daemon god, but not of any hell dimension I have encountered. Its very existence violates the natural order of our cosmos, and yet, it is here, stable, growing stronger. Daemon? Flash spoke up. Like, old-school demons? I thought we dealt with those all the time. Not exactly, Fate replied. This is a creature of pure chaos, given form by the psychic energy of suffering and desire. It should not be able to exist in our reality, and yet the fact that it does suggests that reality itself is being rewritten to accommodate it. Martian Manhunter suddenly clutched his head, a telepathic scream nearly overwhelming his mental defenses. Something is trying to communicate. No, to broadcast. A psychic signal of immense power. Can you trace it? Batman asked. I can try, but... John's words cut off as his eyes went wide. No, it cannot be. I see a god. But not of matter or energy. A god of thought and sensation, and it is looking back at me. The Martian Manhunter collapsed, smoke rising from his head as his psychic defenses barely held against an onslaught of sensory information that would have shattered a human mind instantly. While the Justice League struggled to understand the threat they faced, Slaanesh's influence spread like wildfire through the DC universe. The Chaos God did not invade the normal way, by way of force. Instead it corrupted, perverted, and seduced. In Gotham City, the effect was perhaps most pronounced. The city had always walked a razor's edge between order and chaos, and Slaanesh's presence tipped the balance dramatically. The Joker was the first to truly embrace what was happening, though he did so in his own unique way. You see, Harley, he said to his former psychiatrist, turned accomplice as they stood on a rooftop overlooking the city. This is what I've been trying to tell everyone all along. Life is meaningless, so we might as well make it interesting, and our new friend from wherever, they understand that better than anyone. Harley Quinn, however, was less certain. She'd seen madness in many forms, but this felt different. Wrong. I don't know, Pudding. This doesn't feel like fun crazy. This feels like scary crazy. All the best kinds of crazy are scary, my dear. The Joker's grin widened impossibly. Now come along. I want to meet our new benefactor. I have a feeling we're going to be great friends. But the Joker would find that even his particular brand of chaos paled in comparison to what Slaanesh represented. When he finally encountered one of the daemonettes, the androgynous, crab-clawed servants of the Dark Prince, his laughter actually stopped for a moment. Oh, he said quietly. Oh, you're not funny at all, are you? You're something else. The daemonette smiled with its too wide mouth. We are the perfection of desire, mortal. Join us, and no sensation beyond your wildest dreams. For perhaps the first time in his life, the Joker felt something like genuine unease. This wasn't chaos for the sake of challenging order. This was consumption for the sake of consumption. There was no punchline, no grand joke, just endless, mindless wanting. Yeah, I think I'll pass, he said, backing away. You folks are a bit too much for my taste. Meanwhile, in Metropolis, Superman confronted the Herald directly, the crowd of worshippers parting before him like a wave. The Man of Steel had faced powerful beings before, Darkseid, Mongol, even the old gods of New Genesis, but this was different. "I don't know who or what you are," Superman said, his voice carrying the authority of Earth's greatest hero, "but this ends now. Release these people from whatever hold you have on them." The herald laughed, a sound like breaking glass and distant screams. "Release them? They came to us willingly, Kal-El of Krypton. We offered them everything they had been denied: pleasure without guilt, sensation without limit, perfection without flaw. Who are you to deny them their choice?" "Choice implies freedom," Superman replied. "They're being controlled." "Are they?" The herald gestured to the crowd. "Ask them yourself." Superman's super-hearing had already confirmed what he feared. The people around him were not speaking in monotone, not enslaved in the traditional sense. They were euphoric. Their heart rates were elevated from excitement, not fear. They wanted to be here. "This is mass psychosis," Superman said. "Some kind of chemical or psychic influence. So certain, are you, that your way is the only right way?" The herald's mask shifted to an expression of mock sympathy. "You stand there in your red and blue, a beacon of hope and justice, never stopping to consider that perhaps your morality is simply another form of tyranny. The Dark Prince offers liberation from such constraints. What I offer is a choice to live without being consumed by your own appetites," Superman countered. "Now stand down, or I'll make you stand down." The herald's laugh intensified. "Then strike me down, son of Krypton. Show these people the violence that underlies your supposed heroism. Show them that you will hurt them to enforce your will upon them." It was a trap, and Superman knew it. If he attacked, he risked injuring the civilians. If he didn't, the corruption would continue to spread. This was psychological warfare. Before Superman could respond, reality twisted. The air itself seemed to curdle, and through a rent in space stepped something that made even the Man of Steel take an involuntary step backward. It was beautiful in the way a supernova is beautiful and overwhelming. The daemon that emerged was larger than the herald, its form shifting between genders and shapes, adorned with armor that seemed to be part sculpture, part living organism. It carried a massive sword that wept an iridescent fluid, and its eyes, all 6 of them, fixed on Superman with an intensity that was almost physical. "Keeper of secrets," the herald said, bowing low. "You honor us with your presence." The greater daemon spoke in a voice that resonated on multiple frequencies simultaneously. "The Dark Prince wishes to extend an invitation to the Kryptonian. She who thirsts finds your perfection, intriguing, your power, your restraint. Imagine what you could become if you simply let go." Superman felt it then, a psychic pressure against his mind, offering visions of what he could be if he abandoned his moral code. A god-king ruling over humanity, not as a protector, but as a master. Unlimited power, unlimited pleasure, unlimited everything. For just a moment, the temptation was almost overwhelming. Then he thought of her mother, Martha Kent, baking cookies in Smallville, of Lois Lane, calling him Smallville with that knowing smile, of Jonathan Kent's words, "You were sent here for a reason, to help people, to show them the light." "No," Superman said, and his voice carried such conviction that several of the cultists nearest to him actually flinched. "I've seen what unlimited power looks like. It's called Darkseid. Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying." The Keeper of Secrets tilted its head, almost amused. "Then you will watch as your world embraces what you reject. The corruption cannot be stopped, Kryptonian. It has already begun." And with that, the daemon vanished, taking the herald with it. But the crowd remained, still worshipping, still devoted to their new dark god. Superman activated his comm. "Batman, we have a problem. This isn't something we can punch our way out of." In Sector 2814, Hal Jordan was having what might generously be called a very bad day. His ring, usually a bastion of unwavering willpower, kept flickering. The green light that had been his constant companion since Aben Sur had chosen him was now unstable, occasionally shot through with that sickening purple-pink radiance that had infected the emotional spectrum. Ring, status report. Hal demanded for the 5th time in as many minutes. Willpower at 73% and declining, the ring responded. Unknown energy signature interfacing with emotional spectrum. Corruption probability increasing. Warning. Prolonged exposure may result in. The ring's warning cut off as a wave of pure sensation washed over Hal. For a moment, he felt everything. Every pleasure he'd ever denied himself. Every desire he'd sublimated for duty. Every want he'd pushed aside. It was glorious and terrible, and he wanted more, and he needed to stop and know. Hal's will reasserted itself, the green light flaring bright enough to push back the corruption, but it was getting harder. Each time the psychic assault came, it was stronger, more seductive. A green energy construct appeared before him, a holographic communication from Oa. Ganthet's face, normally serene, was creased with concern. Lantern Jordan, you must return to Oa immediately. The situation is critical. When Hal arrived at the citadel of the Guardians, he found chaos. Hundreds of lanterns from across the universe had gathered, and many of them looked as shaken as he felt. More concerning, some of them were no longer glowing green. Their uniforms had taken on that corrupted purple hue, and their eyes held that same fevered gleam he'd seen in Metropolis. Kilowog, the gruff drill instructor who had trained generations of lanterns, stood guard over several of these corrupted lanterns, his face a mask of pain. They just gave in, he said to Hal. Stopped fighting, said the pleasure was too much to resist. Pleasure? Hal's eyes narrowed. This enemy doesn't attack from outside, Ganthet explained, having appeared beside them. It attacks from within. It finds the cracks in will, the hidden desires, the suppressed wants, and it exploits them. For beings whose very power is based on willpower and self-control, it is perhaps the perfect weapon. So what do we do? Hal asked. Before Gantet could answer, an alarm that Hal rarely ever heard began to sound. The red alert was reserved for only the most catastrophic threats. The central power battery, one of the other Guardians said, her voice hollow with shock. It has been compromised. Hal and Kilowog raced to the battery chamber, the massive green lantern that powered every ring in the core. What they found there would haunt Hal's nightmares for years to come. The chamber had been transformed. The sterile, geometric perfection of Oan architecture had been corrupted into something organic and wrong. The walls pulsed with a heartbeat-like rhythm, and the very air seemed to writhe with invisible presences. And at the center, corrupting the central power battery itself, was a daemon the likes of which neither Hal nor Kilowog had ever encountered. It was massive, easily 40 feet tall, its form an impossible fusion of masculine and feminine, its 6 arms spread wide as if embracing the battery itself. Where its hands touched the green light, purple-pink corruption spread like an infection. Behold! The daemon's voice was pleasure and pain-given sound. The fall of the Guardian's great work. Your precious will means nothing before the perfection of desire. Lay down your rings. Embrace the gift of the Dark Prince. No sensation beyond your limited comprehension. Hal raised his ring, willing it to fire, but the construct that formed was weak, flickering. Half the lanterns around him had already fallen to their knees, some weeping, some laughing, all overcome. We need backup, Kilowog growled. We need the whole damn core here now. But even as he spoke, they both knew the truth. If the central power battery fell, the Green Lantern Corps would cease to exist. And if the Corps fell, one of the universe's greatest defenses against cosmic threats would be gone. Hal Jordan had faced impossible odds before. He'd reignited suns, fought parallax, even briefly become the equivalent of a god during the zero-hour crisis. But this was different. This wasn't about power. It was about corruption of the very concept of willpower itself. Kilowog, Hal said quietly, if I don't make it out of this, tell Carol. Can that talk, Pooza? Kilowog interrupted. We're both getting out of this. We're lanterns. It's what we do. Together, they charged. On Apocalypse, Darkseid sat upon his throne and considered. The Lord of Tyranny had observed the corruption spreading through the DC universe with great interest. Here was a force that operated on principles fundamentally different from his own, yet pursuing a goal not entirely dissimilar, the domination and transformation of all life. Desaad stood at his master's side, as always, his wizened face twisted in thought. My lord, this incursion from beyond represents both opportunity and threat. If we could harness this power, silence, Darkseid's voice was like the grinding of tectonic plates. You understand nothing, Desaad. This is not a power to be harnessed. It is a cancer. Granny Goodness, her own considerable psychic abilities allowing her to sense the changes sweeping the universe, approached cautiously. The lowlies are rebelling, Great One. Many have turned to worship this new god. They claim it offers them pleasures beyond our tortures. Darkseid's eyes flared with the Omega beams, incinerating a nearby parademon in a flash of crimson energy. Not out of anger at Granny, but simply to make a point. Pleasure, he said, his contempt absolute, is a weakness. Pain is a tool. Control is perfection. What approaches is the antithesis of order. It is chaos wearing the mask of liberation. And chaos, ultimately, is anathema to Apocalypse. Then we fight it? Desaad asked. We contain it, Darkseid corrected. I did not spend millennia conquering galaxies only to see them fall to some mewling god of excess. The universe will know order, my order, or it will know oblivion. Ready the parademons, prepare the mother boxes, and summon Kalibak, Steppenwolf, and the female furies. We go to war. It was a strange day indeed when Darkseid, the god of evil, stood in defense of reality against an even greater darkness. Batman wasn't sleeping anymore. He rarely did even before this crisis, but now sleep was truly impossible. In the Batcave, surrounded by screens displaying data from across the globe, Bruce Wayne worked to understand an enemy that defied all conventional analysis. Alfred brought him his 7th cup of coffee of the night. Master Bruce, even you have limits. You've been at this for 48 hours straight. Then I'll push past my limits, Bruce said without looking up. I'm close to something, Alfred. The corruption follows patterns, but they're not patterns of conquest. They're patterns of infection. It spreads through emotional vulnerability, through suppressed desires, through the gaps in psychological defense. On one of his screens, Bruce had been analyzing the cultists in Metropolis frame by frame. There was something about the way they moved, the way they spoke, that suggested their conversion wasn't complete. There were micro-expressions of confusion, of fear, buried beneath the euphoria. They're being overwritten, Bruce muttered. Their own desires and personalities are being buried under what this entity wants them to desire. Which means the original personality is still there, just suppressed. How does one fight a god, Master Bruce? Alfred asked quietly. Bruce finally looked up, his eyes bloodshot but fierce. The same way you fight anything else. You find its weakness. Every system has a weakness, Alfred. Even a god. A priority alert flashed across his screens, a message from Dr. Fate, encrypted and marked urgent. Bruce opened it and read quickly, his expression growing darker with each line. Fate says the entity has a name, Bruce said. Slaanesh, the Dark Prince of Chaos. It comes from something called the warp, a dimension of pure psychic energy from an entirely different reality. And according to Fate's research, it's one of 4 such entities, chaos gods that have laid waste to countless civilizations in their own reality. 4? Alfred's British composure finally cracked slightly. You're telling me there are 3 more of these things potentially waiting to invade. Let's focus on the one that's actually here. Bruce said grimly. Fate is coming here to the cave. He says he's found something in the ancient texts, a possible counter-measure. But he needs my help to implement it. Dr. Fate materialized in the Batcave an hour later, the golden helm of Naboo gleaming even in the dim light. Batman. Thank you for seeing me. What did you find? Bruce asked, wasting no time. In the darkest corners of magical lore, there are references to entities like this, Fate explained. Beings of pure emotion and psychic energy, gods born from thought itself. Our universe has encountered similar threats before, the emotional entities that empower the Lantern Corps, for instance. But those entities were bound to the emotional spectrum of our reality. Slaanesh is something else. It brings its own rules, its own physics. Can it be banished? Possibly, but not through force. Slaanesh feeds on sensation, on experience, on the very act of resistance. The more we fight it, the more we feel fear, determination, anger, the stronger it becomes. We cannot defeat it through conventional means. Then what do you propose? Fate paused, and even through the helm, Bruce could sense the ancient entity's hesitation. We must create a void, a psychic dead zone where emotion cannot exist, where desire cannot take root. And we must lure Slaanesh into it. A trap, Bruce said. You want to create a prison? Yes, but it will require sacrifices. The void I speak of must be maintained by living beings who willingly suppress all emotion, all desire, all sensation. They must become living null zones, anchors for a cage that can hold a god. How many? Hundreds, perhaps thousands. And they must maintain this state indefinitely, or the cage will fail. Bruce was silent for a long moment, considering the implications. You're asking people to give up their humanity to save humanity. I am asking them to become something greater than human, Fate corrected. Martyrs in the truest sense. I'll need to present this to the League. But first, we need more information. I want to know everything about this Slaanesh. Its origin, its weaknesses, its patterns of behavior. If we're going to trap a god, we need to understand it completely. Then I suggest we consult with someone who has experience with gods, Fate said. Both the understanding of them and the binding of them. Wonder Woman, Bruce realized, and perhaps others, the Spectre, the Phantom Stranger. Even Lucifer Morningstar, if he can be persuaded to take an interest. Bruce activated his communicator. Everyone, I'm calling an emergency session. We have a plan. It's terrible, but it's the only one we have. Diana Prince stood in the ruins of what had once been a temple to Aphrodite in Greece. The temple had been beautiful once, a monument to love in its purest form. Now it had been corrupted, transformed into something obscene, a shrine to lust and excess that bore the unmistakable mark of Slaanesh's influence. The statues of Aphrodite had been warped, made grotesque in their beauty, their forms too perfect, too exaggerated. The worshippers who had once come here for blessings now engaged in acts that made even the experienced Amazon warrior look away in disgust. This ends, Diana said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of her divine heritage. She raised the lasso of truth, its golden rope glowing with the light of Hestia. The lasso didn't just compel honesty, it revealed truth in its most fundamental sense, and truth was anathema to corruption. With a single motion, Diana lashed out with the lasso, wrapping it around the central altar. Immediately, the corrupted stone began to crack, the false beauty sloughing away to reveal the rotting reality beneath. The worshippers screamed, not in pain but in sudden awareness, the lasso forcing them to see what they had become. "You have been deceived." Diana's voice rang out like a bell. "This is not love. This is not pleasure. This is consumption wearing the mask of ecstasy. You have been made into cattle for a god that cares nothing for you beyond what you can feed it." One of the cultists, tears streaming down her face, looked at Diana with dawning horror. What have I done? My children. I abandoned my children. "You were corrupted," Diana said more gently, "but you are not lost, not yet. Come with me, all of you. I will take you to Themyscira, where the Amazons can help you heal." But even as she spoke, Diana felt the psychic pressure intensifying. Slaanesh had noticed her interference, and it was not pleased. Reality tore, and through the rent stepped a daemon. It was beautiful and terrible, its form shifting between masculine and feminine with liquid grace. It wore armor that seemed to be carved from screaming faces, and it carried a whip that dripped with venom that hissed and bubbled where it touched the ground. "Amazon," the daemon purred, its voice like honey and acid. "Daughter of Hippolyta, blessed by the gods of Olympus, how delicious you would be, transformed into a servant of the Dark Prince. Imagine the pleasures we could show you. Imagine the sensations you deny yourself with your warrior's discipline. All of it could be yours." Diana's response was to hurl her shield with such force that it shattered the sound barrier. The daemon caught it easily, laughing. "Such aggression, such passion. Oh yes, you would make a wonderful addition to our number. The she who thirsts has plans for you, Amazon, plans that will bring you such exquisite agony and rapture that—" Diana didn't let it finish. She charged, her god-forged sword drawn, moving faster than mortal eyes could follow. The battle that followed was brief but intense, the Amazon princess's skill with blade and fist against the daemon's unnatural speed and regeneration. But Diana quickly realized the problem. Every time she struck the daemon, she was feeding it. Her emotions, her passion for justice, her warrior's joy in defeating evil, all of it was sustenance for the creature. She had to change tactics. Diana stepped back, lowered her sword, and began to meditate. In the heat of battle, with a daemon mere feet away, she calmed herself. She reached for the center of peace that her Amazon training had instilled in her, the eye of the storm where emotion existed but did not control. The daemon hesitated, confused. What are you doing? Fight me. Rage against me. Show me your Amazon fury." "No," Diana said simply, her voice perfectly calm. "I will not feed you further." And then she raised the lasso of truth once more, but this time she did not strike with it. She offered it to the daemon. "Take it," she said. "If you dare, touch the lasso and experience truth, not the corrupted truth of your dark prince, but absolute, objective truth. See yourself as you truly are." The daemon recoiled as if burned. "You cannot trick me with your divine trinkets, Amazon. I am perfection. I am." "You are a slave," Diana interrupted, still perfectly calm. "A slave to a god that cares nothing for you. A god that will discard you the moment you cease to amuse it. You speak of pleasure and sensation, but you have never known true joy, have you? Joy is not consumption. Joy is connection, love, purpose. You have none of these things." For just a moment, something flickered in the daemon's eyes, something that might have been doubt. Then it was gone, and the daemon shrieked in rage, lunging for Diana with all its supernatural speed. But Diana was ready. She wrapped the lasso around the daemon's arm, and the creature's scream changed from rage to pure agony. The lasso of truth did its work, forcing the daemon to confront the reality of its existence, eons of servitude to a god of hunger, an eternity of unfulfilled desire, an endless cycle of consumption that led nowhere and meant nothing. The daemon began to dissolve, its form unraveling as the truth of its own emptiness consumed it from within. "Tell your master," Diana said to the dissolving creature, "that the gods of Olympus do not fear the gods of chaos. We have stood since before mortals walked this earth, and we will stand long after Slaanesh is forgotten." But even as she spoke, Diana knew it was bravado. She had won this battle, but it was a single fight in a war that was far from over. Her communicator chimed. Batman's voice came through. "Diana, we're meeting at the watchtower. I have a plan, but you're not going to like it. I'll be there," Diana said, looking at the cultists she'd saved. They were beginning to recover, but the scars, both physical and mental, would take time to heal, time they might not have. The meeting that took place in the watchtower 3 hours later was unlike any in the Justice League's history. Batman had not only assembled the League, but had also brought in representatives from across the cosmic hierarchy of power. At the table sat Superman, Wonder Woman, the Flash, Green Lantern, a haggard Hal Jordan, fresh from the disaster on Oa, Aquaman, Cyborg, Martian Manhunter, and Dr. Fate. But they were joined by far stranger allies. The Spectre, God's spirit of vengeance, loomed at one end of the table, his vast green form radiating overwhelming power. Beside him stood the Phantom Stranger, wrapped in his cloak and keeping his own counsel. Zatanna represented the magical community, though her eyes were haunted from what she'd witnessed in recent days. And most shocking of all, Lucifer Morningstar sat at the table, the devil himself, looking simultaneously bored and intrigued. Behind him stood Dream of the Endless, his dark eyes revealing nothing. "This is quite the gathering," Lucifer said, his British accent impeccable. "When the Phantom Stranger visits your piano bar and suggests you might want to attend a meeting to prevent the end of all existence, one takes notice. Your assistance is appreciated, Morningstar," Batman said, getting straight to business. "We're facing an incursion from an entirely different reality, a chaos god called Slaanesh. Dr. Fate believes it can be trapped, but we need power on a cosmic scale to create and maintain that trap. And you thought to call upon me because?" Lucifer raised an eyebrow. "Because you once held dominion over hell itself," Batman replied. "You know how to bind beings of immense power, and because, for all your complicated relationship with humanity, you seem to prefer this reality intact rather than corrupted by something from outside it." "Territorial, I suppose you could say," Lucifer admitted. "I'm quite fond of this universe, chaotic as it is. Having it infected by some gauche pretender to godhood does rankle somewhat." Dream spoke for the first time, his voice like whispered secrets. "Slaanesh has begun to infiltrate my realm. The dreaming is under assault. Nightmares are becoming real, twisted into servitude of the Dark Prince. If this continues, the barrier between dreams and waking will collapse." "Dream speaks true," the Spectre rumbled. "The corruption spreads beyond the physical. It infects souls, dreams, even the fundamental concepts that give reality structure. If left unchecked, Slaanesh will not merely conquer this universe, it will transform it into an extension of its own domain." "Then we act now," Superman said. "Batman, lay out your plan." Batman activated a holographic display. "According to Dr. Fate, Slaanesh feeds on emotion, sensation, and desire. Fighting it directly only makes it stronger. Every feeling we experience in battle empowers it, so we don't fight it, we trap it." "In what?" Flash asked. "It's a god from another dimension. What could possibly hold it?" "A cage made of nothing," Fate answered. "A void where emotion cannot exist, where desire has no meaning. We create a space outside of space, a moment frozen in time, where Slaanesh will be isolated from the psychic energy it needs to sustain itself." "The Phantom Zone," Superman realized. "You want to put it in the Phantom Zone?" "Not exactly," Batman corrected. The Phantom Zone still exists within our reality. This would be different, a custom-built prison, created specifically for this purpose. But yes, the concept is similar. Zatanna spoke up. Creating such a space would require magic on a scale I've never attempted. We'd need to bind reality itself, create a fold in existence. The magical backlash alone could kill hundreds of magic users, which is why we need help from beings who operate on a cosmic scale, Batman said, looking pointedly at Lucifer and the Spectre. Lucifer laughed, genuinely amused. You want me, the Morning Star, the Lightbringer, the devil himself, to help you build a prison for a god? Oh, Bruce, if you weren't so deadly serious, I'd find this hilarious. Will you help or not? Batman asked bluntly. Lucifer's smile faded, replaced by something harder. I will, but understand, detective, what you're asking requires more than just power. It requires sacrifice. To create a true void, beings must willingly enter it and maintain it. They must become living nulls, forever suspended in a state of absolute emptiness. You're asking people to give up their very souls. I know, Batman said quietly, which is why this will be an entirely voluntary effort. I won't conscript anyone into this. Those who choose to become anchors for the cage will do so knowing exactly what they're sacrificing. And you think you'll find volunteers for this? Aquaman asked skeptically. I do, Batman replied, because the alternative is the complete corruption of our reality. There are people who will make that sacrifice if it means saving everyone else. Wonder Woman placed a hand on Batman's shoulder. Bruce, you're planning to be one of the anchors, aren't you? The silence that followed was damning. No, Superman said firmly. Absolutely not. We'll find another way. There is no other way, Batman said. I've run every scenario, every simulation. This is the only plan that has a chance of working, and it needs anchors who have strong enough will to maintain the void indefinitely. Who better than the person who's made willpower and self-control his entire identity? Clark finished. Bruce, you're talking about eternal torture, eternal emptiness, no thoughts, no feelings, no existence beyond serving as a living prison bar. I'm talking about saving the world, Batman shot back. Something we've all sworn to do, no matter the cost. The detective has a point, the Spectre said. Though the cost is indeed terrible, the alternative is far worse. Slaanesh will not stop with Earth. It will consume world after world, transforming all life into servitors of its insatiable hunger. This is an act of cosmic necessity. How many anchors would we need? Wonder Woman asked, her voice heavy. Thousands. Dr. Fate replied. To create a void large enough to contain a chaos god and maintain it indefinitely would require thousands of souls in perfect synchronization, all maintaining absolute emotional nullity. Then we need to present this to the people, Superman said. We can't make this decision for them. This has to be a choice freely made. Agreed, Batman said, but we need to move fast. Slaanesh's corruption is spreading exponentially. The longer we wait, the fewer people will be capable of making that choice at all. Lucifer stood, straightening his impeccable suit. Well, this has been delightfully depressing. I'll begin preparations on my end. Dream. I'll need access to the dreaming to anchor one corner of this cage. Spectre, you'll need to provide the divine authorization. And Detective, you'll need to gather your volunteers. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. If this fails, and there's a very real chance it will, then we're not just looking at the corruption of this reality. We're looking at the potential collapse of the entire multiverse. The walls between universes are already weakened. If Slaanesh establishes a permanent foothold here, the other Chaos Gods will follow. And then, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. After Lucifer left, followed by Dream and the Phantom Stranger, the Justice League sat in stunned silence. We're really doing this, Flash said quietly. We're really asking people to sacrifice their souls to save the world. We're giving them the choice, Batman corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Flash's voice was uncharacteristically serious. Bruce, most people who volunteer for this won't really understand what they're signing up for. How can anyone truly comprehend something like this? They can't, Batman admitted. But they can understand that their sacrifice will save everyone they love. That's been enough for heroes throughout history. Wonder Woman looked at each of her teammates in turn. If we're going to ask this of others, we need to be willing to make the same sacrifice ourselves. I will volunteer as an anchor if needed. As will I, Superman said. And I, Martian Manhunter added. One by one, the members of the Justice League voiced their willingness to be anchors for the cage. Even Flash, despite his obvious reservations, nodded his agreement. Batman looked at his friends, the greatest heroes Earth had ever known, and felt something he rarely allowed himself to feel: pride. And beneath that, a deep sadness at what they might all have to sacrifice. Then it's settled, he said. We build the cage, we gather the volunteers, and we trap a god. One question, Hal Jordan said, speaking up for the first time since the meeting began. How do we actually get Slaanesh into the cage? A god isn't just going to walk into a trap. Batman's expression grew even grimmer. We give it what it wants most. We offer it a being of such concentrated emotion, such powerful desire, such perfect sensation that it can't resist. We offer it. Bait. And who? Hal started to ask, then stopped as realization dawned. Oh no, Bruce, you can't be serious. I'm always serious, Hal. And yes, the bait will be me. The room erupted in protest, but Batman raised a hand. Listen to me. Slaanesh feeds on sensation and emotion. It's been trying to corrupt us since it arrived because we represent concentrated sources of what it craves. Heroes, by definition, feel things intensely: determination, compassion, rage at injustice. We're premium fuel for a god of excess. And of all of us, I've spent my entire life cultivating control over my emotions while simultaneously feeling them as strongly as possible. I am exactly what Slaanesh wants, which is exactly why we can't let you do this, Superman said firmly. If you're the bait and something goes wrong, then I'll be trapped in the cage with Slaanesh, Batman finished. I know, but someone has to do it, Clark. Someone has to be willing to take that risk. And it has to be someone Slaanesh will believe it can corrupt. There has to be another way, Wonder Woman insisted. If you think of one, I'm all ears, Batman replied. But we're running out of time. Every minute we debate this, more people fall to the corruption. More of our reality is transformed. We need to act, and we need to act now. The Flash, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. What if it wasn't just you? What if we all acted as bait? All of us together, the whole league. Slaanesh wouldn't be able to resist that much concentrated emotion. Batman considered this. It could work. The danger would be multiplied, but so would the lure. And if we all maintained calm silence until the last possible moment, we could coordinate the trap more effectively. I don't like this plan, Aquaman said. But I like the alternative even less. If we're doing this, we do it together. Agreed, said Superman, his jaw set with determination. We're a team. We face this together, or not at all. Batman nodded slowly. Then we're committed. Dr. Fate, how long until you can have the cage ready? With the assistance of Lucifer and the Spectre, perhaps 72 hours. But Batman, you should know that even with all our power, the cage will not be permanent. Eventually, the anchors will weaken. Eventually, the void will decay. We will buy ourselves time, decades, perhaps centuries, but not eternity. Then we use that time to find a permanent solution, Batman said. or we use it to evacuate this universe entirely. But first, we trap the god. Across the DC universe, the call went out. Batman's message was broadcast on every frequency, every medium, every communication channel that existed. It was simple, direct, and terrifying in its honesty. This is Batman of the Justice League. Our reality is under attack by an entity from beyond our universe, a being we've identified as Slaanesh, a chaos god from another dimension. This entity feeds on emotion and sensation, corrupting all who feel its influence. It cannot be defeated using normal means. We have developed a plan to trap Slaanesh, but it requires volunteers, individuals willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. Those who volunteer will become anchors for a psychic prison, maintaining a void of absolute emotional nullity for as long as they exist. This means giving up all feeling, all sensation, all thought beyond the single purpose of maintaining the cage. I won't sugarcoat this. What we're asking is arguably worse than death. You will exist in a state of complete emptiness, conscious but not alive in any meaningful sense. You will sacrifice your very soul to save everyone else. But if we don't succeed, if we don't trap Slaanesh, then everything, everyone, will fall to corruption. Our world, our universe, everything we love will be transformed into an extension of the Chaos God's hunger. The choice is yours. If you wish to volunteer, report to your nearest Justice League representative within the next 60 hours. And, thank you, whatever you choose, thank you for even considering this. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Millions of people contacted the League, though not all understood what they were truly volunteering for. Batman and his team had to carefully screen volunteers, ensuring they genuinely comprehended the sacrifice they were offering. But even with careful screening, the volunteers came. Heroes who had fought alongside the League, ordinary people who simply wanted to protect their families, criminals who saw a chance at redemption, magic users willing to give up their power for the greater good. Monks and priests who had spent lifetimes preparing for spiritual transcendence, now offering to achieve it in service of salvation. In Gotham, Commissioner Gordon stood before Batman in the Batcave, having used the bat signal to request a meeting. "I want to volunteer," Gordon said simply. "Jim," Batman started. "Don't," Gordon interrupted. "Don't try to talk me out of this. I've been a cop for 40 years, Bruce. I've seen evil in every form it takes. And I've seen you and your family fight it every single day. Let me do my part. Let me help save the world." "You've already done more than your part," Batman said quietly. "Gotham needs you." "Gotham will need a lot of people after this is over," Gordon replied. "But if we don't stop this thing, there won't be a Gotham to need anyone. I've made my choice." Batman looked at his oldest ally in the fight for justice, and for once, the Dark Knight's mask of control slipped. "Thank you, Jim, for everything." Gordon nodded, understanding all that remained unspoken between them. "Take care of Barbara for me. Tell her I love her, and that I'm proud of her." Similar scenes played out across the world. In Metropolis, a young woman named Sarah Chen, who had been saved by Superman during the last Brainiac invasion, volunteered because he gave me my life back. It's only right I use it to save his. In Central City, a reformed member of the Rogues stepped forward, saying, "Flash always believed I could be better. Time to prove him right." On Themyscira, 100 Amazons stood ready, willing to join their princess in sacrifice. The numbers grew, thousands, then tens of thousands. Far more than the minimum required. "People are good," Superman said to Batman as they reviewed the volunteer lists. "When it really counts, people are good." "I know," Batman replied. "I've always known. That's why we do this." But not everyone was volunteering out of heroism. In the shadows, Slaanesh watched through the eyes of its cultists and daemons, and it laughed. "Let them build their cage. The Dark Prince whispered across the warp. Let them gather their volunteers. They do not understand that sacrifice, that suffering, that final desperate gesture of hope before oblivion. These are the sweetest sensations of all. Their trap will become their greatest gift to me. The keeper of secrets that had confronted Superman in Metropolis stood before a gathering of greater daemons, each a being of terrible power. The mortals think to bind our prince, it said, its voice dripping with amusement. They think their void will contain she who thirsts. They do not comprehend that Slaanesh was born from the psychic death scream of an entire species. That our prince has devoured the souls of billions. That no cage built by mortal hands, or even immortal ones, can hold a god of the warp for long. Then why do we not simply attack? One of the other daemons asked. Because, the keeper replied, our prince wishes to play with these heroes a while longer. They are entertaining. And when their trap fails, when they realize the futility of their resistance, the despair will be exquisite. In the space between spaces, where reality bent upon itself like a Mobius strip, Lucifer Morningstar, Dream of the Endless, the Spectre, and Dr. Fate worked to construct the impossible. They stood at the cardinal points of a cosmic mandala, each channeling power of a different fundamental type. Lucifer drew upon the raw creative force that had been his before his fall, shaping reality with the same precision he once used to form stars. Dream wove patterns from the substance of the dreaming, creating a framework where thought could become tangible. The Spectre provided divine authority, the weight of God's will lending structure to their working. And Dr. Fate bound it all together with magic older than the earth itself. This is delicate work, Dream observed, his hands moving in patterns that existed in more than 3 dimensions. The void must be absolute, yet not so absolute that it collapses into true nothingness. It must be maintained by will, yet will itself is a form of desire. A paradox, Lucifer agreed. We're essentially asking people to desire the absence of desire, to will themselves into unwilling. It's philosophically dubious at best. It will work because it must, the Spectre intoned. The Lord has decreed that this reality shall not fall while there are those willing to defend it. The cage will hold. For a time, Dr. Fate added grimly. But Lucifer is correct. This is a paradox, and paradoxes are inherently unstable. We are buying time, nothing more. Then we make the time we buy count, Lucifer said. Dream, I'll need you to create a psychic anchor point in the dreaming. Somewhere that exists outside normal causality, where the anchors can maintain their connection to the void without being completely severed from existence. Dream nodded, already beginning to weave that space into being. It would be a gray place, neither light nor dark, where the anchors would exist in a state of suspended consciousness, not quite dead, not quite alive, not dreaming, not waking, a state of pure empty being. Back on Earth, preparations continued at a feverish pace. The Justice League had established gathering points across the globe where volunteers were being prepared for what was to come. Magic users like Zatanna and Constantine, who had shown up uninvited but useful, were teaching basic mental discipline techniques. Buddhist monks and Christian mystics provided spiritual counseling. Psychologists helped people come to terms with what they were choosing. And Batman oversaw it all, coordinating the largest mobilization of civilian volunteers in history. This feels wrong, Clark said to him during a brief moment of respite. We're asking people to give up everything. We're accepting their choice to give up everything, Bruce corrected. There's a difference, Clark. Everyone here knows what they're doing. Do they? Can anyone really know? Bruce was silent for a moment. No, they can't. Just like we can't really know what will happen when we lure Slaanesh into the cage, but we make the choice anyway, because the alternative is unacceptable. Clark looked at his friend, the man who had turned his own pain and fear into a crusade for justice. who had faced down gods and monsters with nothing but will and preparation. You know there's a good chance you won't make it out of the cage, right? If you're the bait, if you're the one Slaanesh focuses on. I know, Bruce said simply. And you're okay with that? No, but I'm willing to accept it. Before Clark could respond, alarms blared across the watchtower. Cyborg's voice came through on all channels. We've got a massive incursion, multiple breaches opening worldwide. The Daemons are attacking in force. Batman and Superman raced to the command center. The displays showed a nightmare scenario. Dozens of warp rifts opening simultaneously across every continent. Daemons were pouring through, led by greater daemons. But they weren't attacking military installations or power centers. They were targeting the volunteers. Slaanesh knows what we're planning, Wonder Woman said, already arming herself. It's trying to kill the volunteers before they can become anchors. All teams, deploy immediately, Batman ordered. Protect the volunteers at all costs. If we lose them, we lose everything. What followed was perhaps the largest coordinated battle in Earth's history. The Justice League split up, each member racing to defend a different gathering point. The Green Lantern Corps, what remained of it after the attack on Oa, joined the fight. The Teen Titans, the Doom Patrol, even the Suicide Squad were mobilized. Every hero, every enhanced individual who could fight, threw themselves into the defense. In Gotham, Batman found himself fighting alongside Nightwing, Red Robin, and Batgirl as waves of Darmanettes crashed against the perimeter they'd established around Robinson Park, where 5,000 volunteers had gathered. These things just keep coming. Nightwing shouted, his Eskrima sticks crackling with electricity as he fought off 3 of the creatures at once. They're trying to overwhelm us through numbers, Batman analyzed even as he fought. They know we can't sustain this level of combat indefinitely. Then we don't sustain it, Batgirl said, triggering an explosive that collapsed part of a building onto a group of daemons. We go on the offensive. We close those rifts. With what? Red Robin asked. We don't have the firepower to. His words were cut off as a massive explosion of light illuminated the night sky. Batman looked up to see Dr. Fate descending, the helm of Nabu blazing with golden radiance. I will seal the rifts, Fate announced. Protect the volunteers while I work. And work he did. Moving from rift to rift with impossible speed, Dr. Fate began to close the tiers in reality, using magic that made the very air scream with power. But for every rift he closed, 2 more seemed to open. In Metropolis, Superman fought a greater demon one-on-one, his heat vision and super strength pushed to their absolute limits. The greater daemon was faster than almost anything Clark had ever fought, and its sword, that weeping, iridescent blade, cut through even his invulnerable skin. You cannot win, Kryptonian. The daemon hissed as they clashed. For every one of us you kill, 10 more will take our place. The warp is infinite. Your endurance is not. Maybe, Superman grunted, catching the sword mid-swing and crushing it with his bare hands. But I don't need to win forever. I just need to win long enough. He drove his fist into the daemon's chest with enough force to shatter a planet, and the creature dissolved into purple-pink mist with a final scream of rage and... Was that pleasure? Across the world, similar battles raged. Wonder Woman fought with the fury of the Amazons, her sword cutting through daemons like a harvester through wheat. The Flash vibrated through attacks, his speed allowing him to be multiple places at once, pulling volunteers to safety even as he fought. Aquaman commanded the oceans themselves, drowning daemons in tsunamis of salt water that burned them like acid. And slowly, impossibly, the heroes began to turn the tide, but the cost was terrible. Hundreds of heroes fell, not killed, but corrupted, their minds and souls twisted by exposure to the daemon's presence. Entire city blocks were transformed into nightmare landscapes of flesh and metal. And still the daemons came. "We can't keep this up," Flash shouted through the comms. "We need to spring the trap now, before we lose any more ground." "The cage isn't ready," Dr. Fate responded. "We need another 12 hours at minimum." "We don't have 12 hours. Wonder Woman's voice was strained. "We barely have 12 minutes. Batman made the decision. "Then we change the plan. We spring the trap with what we have." "Fate, can the cage hold Slaanesh even if it's not complete?" There was a pause. "Possibly, but the chances of containment failure increase dramatically. We might only trap it for hours instead of centuries." "Hours is better than nothing," Batman said. "All teams, fall back to the primary gathering point in Kansas." "We're doing this now." The Justice League began their fighting retreat, pulling back from all fronts and converging on a location in the American heartland that had been chosen for its remoteness. The volunteers, those who had survived the Daemon assault, were already there, being prepared by the mystics for their transformation into anchors. As the heroes gathered, bruised and bleeding but unbroken, Batman looked at them, his family, his friends. The people he would die for. "This is it," he said simply. "Everyone ready?" Superman put a hand on his shoulder. "No, but let's do it anyway." Batman nodded. Then he activated the beacon, a psychic signal amplified by every telepath on Earth, broadcasting a message directly into the warp itself. "Slaanesh, Dark Prince of Chaos, God of Excess, I challenge you. Face me, if you dare. Face the Justice League. Prove your power against those who refuse to bow." The response was immediate and terrible. A rift larger than any before tore open above Kansas, a wound in existence that bled purple-pink light and madness. And through that rift, for the first time, Slaanesh itself began to manifest in the DC universe. The Chaos God was too vast to comprehend fully. What the heroes saw was a fraction, a shadow of its true form projected into their reality. But even that fraction was overwhelming, a being of a mixture of terrible beauty and horror, shifting between forms too perfect and too grotesque, radiating an aura of desire so intense that it was physically painful. When Slaanesh spoke, its voice was a million voices in perfect harmony, each one a scream of ecstasy or agony. "You called, and I have answered. You offer yourselves to me. How delightful. How expected. Did you think your little trap would go unnoticed? I have known of your plans since their inception. I have allowed them, because your defiance, your hope, your desperate struggle, these are the sweetest sensations of all." Batman stepped forward, his voice steady despite the psychic pressure that made his nose bleed. "Then you know this is a trap. You know we mean to cage you, and you came anyway. Of course, because I am curious to see if you can succeed, and because whether you do or not, I win. If you trap me, you condemn thousands to eternal torment as anchors for my prison. Such exquisite suffering. If you fail, I consume your reality. Such exquisite pleasure. Either way, I feast." Wonder Diana raised her lasso. "Then let us see whose will is stronger, a god of chaos, or the champions of order and justice." Slaanesh's laughter was like the sound of breaking glass and distant screams. "Very well. Show me your strength, show me your resolve, show me everything you are, and I will devour it all." The final battle had begun. What happened next would be remembered by those who survived, as the moment the Justice League truly became legends. Superman was the first to charge, flying faster than he ever had, his fist pulled back for a punch that could shatter worlds. But Slaanesh didn't dodge. It absorbed the impact, Superman's fist sinking into the Chaos God's form like hitting water, and then the corruption began. Clark felt it immediately. Pleasure beyond description, sensation beyond comprehension, every desire he'd ever suppressed flooding through him at once, the urge to use his power without restraint. The temptation to rule rather than serve. The simple one to stop fighting, to stop being responsible, to just let go. No, Clark roared, his will asserting itself. He pulled back, heat vision blazing as he burned away the corruption that had touched him. But he could feel it. A part of him wanted what Slaanesh was offering. Wonder Woman was next, her sword blazing with divine fire as she struck at the Chaos God's projected form. The blade cut deep, and Slaanesh's scream was one of pleasure, not pain. Yes, show me your warrior's fury. Show me the rage that drives you. Diana felt her battle lust surge, the Amazon part of her that enjoyed combat responding to Slaanesh's influence. She had to force herself to step back, to center herself in the calm that was the true heart of a warrior. The flash vibrated through Slaanesh's form, trying to disrupt it at a molecular level, but the Chaos God existed in more than 3 dimensions. Barry found himself trapped in a moment of subjective time that lasted centuries, experiencing every sensation the Speed Force had ever granted him all at once, magnified to impossible intensity. When he finally broke free, seconds later in real time, he collapsed, steam rising from his body. One by one, the Justice League threw themselves at Slaanesh, and one by one, they were forced back. Not because they weren't strong enough, they were among the most powerful beings on Earth, but because fighting the Chaos God meant feeding it. Every emotion they felt, every sensation they experienced in combat, only made Slaanesh stronger. This isn't working. Green Lantern shouted, his ring flickering as corruption seeped into the green light. We're just making it more powerful. That's the point. Batman said, and there was something in his voice that made everyone look at him. We were never going to defeat it through combat. We just needed to get it fully manifested in our reality. Fate, is it anchored? Dr. Fate's analysis took only a moment. Yes. Slaanesh has committed enough of its essence to this dimension that it cannot simply retreat to the warp. It is here, truly here. Then spring the trap, Batman ordered. The volunteers, all 50,000 of them, had been arranged in a massive circle around the battle, each one connected to the others through mystical links forged by Zatanna, Constantine, and 100 other magic users. They had been trained, prepared, and counseled. They knew what was coming. As one, they began to meditate, sinking into the deepest mental discipline they had ever achieved. Monks who had studied for decades, psychics who had mastered their abilities, ordinary people whose determination was absolute, all of them managed to reach the same state simultaneously. Emptiness. The void began to form, a sphere of absolute nullity centered on Slaanesh. Where it touched reality, all sensation ceased. The volunteers were channeling their collective will into creating a space where nothing could exist except the pure fact of being. Slaanesh felt it, and, for perhaps the first time since its birth, felt something like fear. No, you cannot. But the void was already expanding, fed by the sacrifice of thousands. Lucifer Morningstar stepped forward, his power adding structure to the cage. Dream of the endless wove it into the fabric of the dreaming, making it real in a way that transcended physical reality. The Spectre raised his hands, and divine authority sealed the working. By the will of the Presence. The Spectre intoned, by the power of creation itself, I bind you, Slaanesh of the Warp. You are trapped, held, contained by the sacrifice of the willing. You shall not feast upon this reality. You shall not corrupt what is not yours to take. The void collapsed inward, compressing around Slaanesh like a fist. The Chaos God shrieked, a sound of rage and denial that shattered windows for miles around. It lashed out, trying to break free, but the cage held. The 50,000 volunteers held. But the cost became immediately apparent. The volunteers were changing until they stopped being people in any meaningful sense. Their bodies remained, sitting in meditation, but their consciousness had merged with the cage itself. They were alive, but not living, aware, but not thinking, existing solely to serve as living bars of a psychic prison. It's working, Dr. Fate said, though his voice was heavy with sorrow. The cage is stable, Slaanesh is contained. For how long? Batman asked. Years, decades if we're fortunate, but eventually, the anchors will weaken. Some will die, and the cage will lose integrity. Others will break under the mental strain, the void will decay. Then we have time to find a permanent solution, Superman said. But he was looking at the volunteers, seeing the vacant expression on faces that had, minutes ago, been full of life and hope. This is wrong, Flash whispered. This is so wrong. This is necessary, Wonder Woman replied, though her own voice shook. They chose this. They chose to save us all. Batman stood before the void, before the cage that now held one of the most terrible entities his reality had ever faced. Through the mystical barriers, he could still sense Slaanesh, raging and screaming, promising vengeance, promising corruption, promising that the cage would eventually fail. And Batman knew it was right. This was a temporary solution. They had bought time, not victory. But sometimes, time was enough. We need to honor their sacrifice, Batman said, turning to face his team. Every single person who became an anchor, who gave up their very soul to save our reality, we need to remember them, and we need to use the time they've given us to find a way to end this threat permanently. How do we kill a god? Aquaman asked. I don't know, Batman admitted, but we'll figure it out. We always do. 6 months had passed since the caging of Slaanesh. The DC Universe was still recovering from the corruption that had spread during those terrible days. Entire cities had been cleansed and rebuilt. Thousands of people had undergone therapy to recover from their brief time under the Chaos God's influence. The Green Lantern Corps was slowly being rebuilt, with new protocols in place to resist psychic corruption. But the scars remained. In the Watchtower, Batman stood before a memorial wall that had been erected to honor the volunteers. 50,000 names, arranged in columns that stretched from floor to ceiling. Commissioner Gordon, Sarah Chen, 100 Amazons, monks, priests, heroes, ordinary citizens, and even criminals. All of them still alive, technically, but beyond the reach of anyone who had known them. I visit them sometimes, a voice said behind him. Batman turned to see Superman, his red cape billowing despite the lack of wind in the space station. Their bodies, Clark continued, they're being maintained in facilities across the world. Life support keeping them healthy while their minds, while they serve as the cage. I talk to them. I know they can't hear me, but I talk to them anyway. About what? Batman asked. About the world they saved, about the children growing up who will never know how close we came to losing everything, about how their sacrifice mattered. Batman nodded slowly. I'm working on something, a way to potentially free them once we've found a permanent solution to Slaanesh. It might not be possible, but you'll try anyway. Superman finished. Because that's what you do. They stood in silence for a moment, two of Earth's greatest heroes, contemplating the cost of victory. Dr. Fate says the cage is holding strong, Batman said eventually. But there are fluctuations, brief moments where the void weakens. It's only for microseconds, but it suggests the decay has already begun. How long do we have? Best case, 50 years. Worst case, 5. Then we have 5 years to solve the unsolvable. Superman said with a slight smile. Sounds like a typical Tuesday for us. Batman almost smiled at that. Almost. In another part of the universe, on the reformed Oa, the Guardians of the Universe convened in emergency session. They had been studying the breach through which Slaanesh had entered their reality, and what they had discovered was deeply troubling. The barrier between universes has been weakened. Ganthet explained to the assembled lanterns. Slaanesh's incursion created a permanent wound in the fabric of reality, and through that wound, we have detected presences. Other entities from the warp, aware now of our existence. The other Chaos Gods, Hal Jordan said grimly. Yes, all three are now aware of the DC universe, and while Slaanesh is trapped, nothing prevents the others from attempting their own incursions. Then we prepare. John Stewart said, his voice carrying the determination of the core. We rebuild, we strengthen, and we stand ready to defend our universe from whatever comes next. Indeed, Ganthet agreed, but we must also be realistic. We stopped Slaanesh, but only barely, and only through terrible sacrifice. If all four Chaos Gods were to attack simultaneously, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone present understood. The DC universe had survived its first contact with the forces of chaos, but that survival had been bought with blood, souls, and desperate hope. And somewhere, in the space between realities, in the roiling madness of the warp, the other dark gods watched and waited. They had seen what Slaanesh had accomplished, how close it had come to consuming an entire reality, and they wanted their turn. The war was not over, it had only just begun. But for now, in this moment, the DC universe was safe. Heroes stood watch, volunteers maintained the cage. And somewhere in the void, trapped but not destroyed, Slaanesh screamed in rage and plotted its eventual escape, because gods are patient and chaos is eternal.